Welcome back to the Nocturnal Game Review channel. Today we have yet another looter shooter, Tom Clancy's The Division 2. The Division 2 takes place 7 months after the dollar flu, and it has now hit the nation's capital, leading to the country's collapse and the rise of several factions within Washington. I'll be scoring The Division 2 on the following categories: story, mission variety, difficulty, characters, enemy variety, bosses, graphics, sound, and controls, as well as fun factor, loot, and replay value. First, let's discuss the story. As mentioned, The Division 2 takes place 7 months after the events of the first game, and Washington has finally been hit. This leads to DC calling all Division agents to the nation's capital. You're introduced to the Division's control for DC, Manny Ortega, as he explains the current situation and factions that have risen to power. I really enjoy the setup, especially when the game uses cutscenes to advance the story, but to me this was too few and far between. Most of the time you get your mission objectives via a radio call or from an NPC who just stands there and talks. One thing I believe Anthem actually got right was the use of cutscenes. They were in-game, sure, but they really helped to establish characters and their personalities. To add to the story, throughout the environment you will be able to find echoes, and these will help paint a picture of events that went down and gives you a point of view from a civilian's perspective, which I think is a nice touch. Then you have audio logs, of course, and I despise audio logs. I would have much preferred finding readable documents or something else besides those dreaded audio logs. Now, the main story is advanced by missions, and you can also gain extra XP through side missions, but let's talk about the mission variety next. To me, one of the most important vital components to a looter shooter is the mission variety. Let me describe the basic Division 2 mission structure. Kill a group of enemies, hit a button to interact with some object in your environment, another wave of enemies that you have to kill, walk around to another objective, kill more enemies, but this time with a boss. Now normally I would take a crap on a game for such simple mission structure, but Division 2 varies it up enough to keep me interested in doing the missions. The little things that the game throws in to shake things up, like throwing in a turret to use against the next wave of enemies after you just fought to get the turret, is rewarding. Or having these EMP zones that strip you of your tech abilities and make the missions much more replayable than if it were just fight, defend some spot, fight every time. There's also several different mission types, like control points, territory captures, hostage executions, propaganda broadcast, and more that help to break up the base mission structure, along with multiplayer, strongholds, which are like badass raid substitutes, and my favorite mode, the Dark Zone. Let's talk about the Dark Zone for a second. More looter shooters need a Dark Zone, a place where greed and loot are king. You can find loot that will help you in recapturing DC, but be warned, all loot gained in the Dark Zone can be taken by other players if they kill you. And you would think players would be the most difficult obstacle in your path, right? Wrong. We have to talk about the difficulty of Division 2. The Division 2 can be a cruel mistress, and even more so if you're being level scaled up in a group. Enemies swarm you and will quickly make you their bitch. With perfect aim at times, the game can seem unfair. But of course, once you conquer the mission that you're restarting for the 6th time, you will feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. I do think they should tone down some of the accuracy enemies seem to have, and this should help the game seem a little more fair to the player. So when it comes down to the story, mission variety, and difficulty, The Division 2 gets a 7 out of 10. The story is okay, but it can be a bit dull, and it's certainly nothing to write home about, and while the missions are varied, even the most varied missions get old if you die 10 times as a group. If anyone wants to see how difficulty should be done, go replay Halo Combat Evolved, because that's how you make a game challenging but fair. Next, let's discuss the characters of Division 2, as well as the character customization. In my opinion, the characters in the Division 2 are boring and cookie cutter. Besides Manny, I don't really recall any of the characters, and that's not good considering the amount of hours I've logged. Not one character grabbed my attention and made me remember them. As for character customization, creating your agent can be a blast since there are plenty of options to choose from. I was actually impressed by the amount of options I had to pick from tattoos to glasses to shirts, shorts, you name it and you can customize it. You can even, change the size of your nose and ears, and I thought that was a really nice touch, and I was really impressed by the character customization in The Division 2. But let's discuss the enemy variety in The Division 2. It's actually a highlight for me, as many of the types of enemies mix up combat and change how you approach the situation. You have snipers who can pin you down and make you cautious of peeking your head out too much. You have melee for hyenas that rush you and keep the pressure on for the entire fight. Oh, and each faction brings different enemy variants to the war zone. True Sons don't use batons for melee. No, they just suicide bomb you instead. There's plenty of different troops, and they each play their own role in combat. As for the bosses or elite troops, they also bring some enemy variety and add more difficulty to missions, and can be a huge threat, even more so than the rushers. There's also some secret bosses you can find in the game, but I'll leave that to y'all to discover. Characters, character customization, enemy variety, and bosses score a 7 out of 10. The characters really hurt the score here, as many of the characters don't strike me as memorable or interesting. However, the enemy variety and bosses really do add depth to the missions, combat, and how you approach every situation. Graphics are next, and they can really be hit or miss. When inside buildings, the graphics look decent, but the environments look too similar. But some interiors do look better than others. For example, the contaminated areas look great and really drive home the atmosphere and devastation the bio attack caused. You see body bags on top of body bags, slumped over bodies of civilians who didn't make it. Another graphical highlight are the dark zones to me. The first time I walked into a dark zone, I was stunned at how great the area looked. Overgrown foliage, abandoned cars, and emptiness of the area made dark zones a great place to explore. When it comes to the sound design in Division 2, it does a nice job of filling in that emptiness with appropriate ambience. From the birds that chirp, to gunfire in the distance, to the game's soundtrack, which I found really enjoyable and kick-ass, especially the song Balcony Rotary, which plays during some encounters and missions. It's definitely a favorite and reminds me a lot of the Doom soundtrack. Ubisoft did a great job also of making the guns all sound different, as at least to me, every gun has its own uniqueness and own unique sound when it's fired. The next category is controls, and the controls in Division 2 to me are top notch, as well as the movement in the game, with just one minor gripe: I wish we could crouch. Other than that, the controls and movement feel great. The cover system responds well, as you can seamlessly move between different cover just by holding down the X button. Also, pro tip, it doesn't tell you, but you can mark enemies simply by aiming at them just for a second. It took me a while to discover this, because I was just wondering, why the hell could I not mark enemies? Then I hit the forums and it was right there. You just look at them for a second and the enemy's marked. So for graphics, sound, and controls, they earn a 9 out of 10. The environments at times are stale and repetitive, but can also be stunning and fully immerse you into the atmosphere with a badass soundtrack and equally good controls. The Division 2 excels in these categories. Now on to what makes us come back to the Division 2 and makes us grind on these looter shooters: the fun factor and the loot aspects of Division 2. I've simply must say that I've had a great time with the Division 2, whether I'm playing solo, taking control points and searching for better loot, or playing with friends or complete randoms. All of it's fun and engaging. The loot in Division 2 is plentiful. From level 1 to 2, I looked completely different, and I didn't have to pay $10 to do so. Imagine that, Anthem. Plenty of the guns look different, as well as the gear and accessories all look unique. You might pick up a higher level gun that's the same as the one you have, but this is few and far between, as usually you get new and unique loot most of the time. Fun factor gets a 9 out of 10. In terms of replay value, it definitely has a lot to offer, and I could see myself making another agent once I max out my current one. Between everything the game offers now and the incoming raids the game will have down the road, players will want to be coming back to the Division 2. However, because of the lack of at least one raid to do, at least to start us out with, and the repetitive at times mission structure, Division 2 scores an 8 out of 10 for replay value. That means the final verdict for Division 2 is a 7.8 out of 10. But we're rounding that up to an 8 out of 10 because we can shoot animals, including dogs, which makes me wonder how the creative team at Ubisoft can sit in their desk chairs with such massive balls. And I also don't like decimals, so if you're a fan of looter shooters, taking down waves of enemies with your bros, or just looking for a fun game to sink some time into, I recommend you go out and buy The Division 2. This has been another Nocturnal game review. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. If not for me, then for all the fallen doggos of Division 2. I'll see you on the next Nocturnal game review.